LTFRB sinuplak at tinawag na inutil si Senator Tulfo. Jeepneys magiging phase out na. Hinimok ng Senado ang LTFRB na ipagpaliban ang plano nitong pag-phase out ng mga tradisyonal na jeepney sa Pilipinas sa Hunyo 30. Pinagtibay ng mga senador araw ng Martes, Pebrero 28, 2023 ang Senate Resolution 507 na mahigpit na hinihimok ng LTFRB na suspendihin ang planong pag-phase out habang hinihintay ang pagresolba sa mga balido at issue ng mga apektadong operator at tsoper hinggil sa Public Utility Vehicle Modernization Program ng gobyerno. Itinakda ni Chairperson Senator Grace Poe ang panukala at tumutukoy sa pagpapatupad ng Memorandum Circular ng LTFRB na nagbibigay ng mga tradisyonal na jeep hanggang Hunyo 2023 upang dumaan sa mga kalsada sakaling mabigo ang kanilang mga operator na sumali o bumuo ng isang kooperatiba o korporasyon. Sa session sa Senado ay nagpalitan ang mga senador sa paghayag ng suporta sa pagpapaliban ng deadline. Partikular na ipinunto ng mga mambabatas ay hindi anila madali para sa mga jeepney operators na maglabas ng 2 million pesos para makabili ng modern jeep at ang kawalan ng pinal na route rationalization plan. Ang hakbang ng Senado ay kasunod sa inanunsyong tigil pasada ng ilang transport groups mula sa 6 ng Marso hanggang sa 12 para ihayag ang kanilang pagtutol sa nasabing deadline para sa jeepney modernization plan. Matapos ang paghayag ng suporta ng lahat ng mga senador para sa pagpapaliban ng deadline, ay inasahan na agad naman magkakaroon ng hearing patungkol dito.
Ng buong Senado para prenohan ang tinakdang phase-out ng mga hari ng kalsada sa darating na ika-30 ng Hunyo 2023. The planned phase-out is yet another sordid chapter in the PUV modernization program. I can say this with certainty as I chaired the committee hearings which have generated enough transcripts to fill a jeepney. But to make the long story short, the PUV modernization program seeks to compel existing jeepney operators to consolidate and form fleets of 15 modern jeepneys which will file routes established by local government units. Each modern jeepney costs 2.8 million pesos, which will be loaned and paid out of pocket. To speed up the policy, the LTFRB unilaterally converted all existing jeepney franchises into one-year provisional authorities. It is in the most recent Memorandum Circular 2023-13, the LTFRB imposed the deadliest deadline. Jeepney operators who have not joined an existing consolidated entity by June 30, 2023, or those who fail to file a petition to consolidate by October 30, 2023, will have their franchises revoked. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the LTFRB should be reminded that jeepney drivers do not have deep pockets. The most recent study estimates that the average daily take-home pay is a meager 755 pesos. Somehow, the LTFRB still expects a gold mine of capital to the tune of 2 million pesos per unit. Hiwalay pa ang cost just to consolidate. A news article estimates that jeepney operators must put up 300,000 pesos in paid-up capital just to register as a transport cooperative. And here's the kick. The equity subsidy provided by the government is a measly 160,000 pesos, not a million, 180,000. Wala pa ito sa 7% ng bagong unit. Ginoong Pangulo, 4 na beses na nag-extend ang LTFRB ang kanilang deadline. Pero kahit kailan ay hindi naman nasagot ang mga reklamo sa programa tungkol sa subsidiya para sa equity ng mga bagong unit. To quote a recent study on the PUV modernization program, it has been too focused on vehicle replacement. Sequencing in the implementation of the PUVMP is very critical. It could have started with regulatory reform, local route, formulation and submission, and route rationalization first before embarking on fleet modernization. This would have given stakeholders better appreciation of the program, an additional grace period, and more time for the operators, drivers to prepare. To implement this program, we need route rationalization. Taon-taon, tuwing nanghihingi ng budget para sa PUV modernization, ay hinihingi natin ang route rationalization plan. But DOTR just entered the 3-year technical cooperation project with JICA in June 2022, only 5 years after the program was launched. Part of the JICA outputs is database of traffic volume as the basic information for the route rationalization plan in Metro Manila and assessment of existing and future routes of PUVs. Based on their 2023 budget submission, the route rationalization studies are still being finalized. Wala pa nga yun eh. Wala pang mga ruta na maaari nating sabihin. Bakit pinapahirapan ang mga driver at commuter kung hindi pa nga nagagawa ng gobyerno ang pag-aaral na ipinangako nito? To enforce a deadline is not only insanity but also inhuman. Hindi makatao, Mr. President. It is contrary to the constitutional directive to promote social justice in all phases of national development. It is also contrary to the public welfare, as it will compound the acute shortage of public transportation modes in the country. Tignan na lamang natin ang pila tuwing rush hour, naghahabulan. Kulang tayo sa tren as the MRT-3 is operating beyond capacity. The reported PNR shutdown to speed up construction of the North-South commuter rail will leave us its 180,000 daily passengers without a ride for at least 5 years. Kulang tayo sa bus as seen in the long queues even on the weekend. Pahirapan at tagaan din ang presyo ng Grab. Pero parang bingi ang LTFRB sa kabila ng paghihirap na dinaranas ng mga commuter at drivers. If the LTFRB proceeds with the phase-out, it might result to 50,000 jeeps being taken off the road. If transport groups proceed with their strike, that's at least 40,000 jeepneys off the street starting March 6. And speaking of social justice, we have a pending bill which seeks to provide a just and humane transition to the PUV modernization program. We are not against modernization. If anything, we want to make it easier to achieve. There's always a win-win solution, and that begins with a united stand from the Senate. We thus move for its adoption of proposed Senate Resolution number 507, Mr. President. Thank you.
Clearly also, there are no safeguards whatsoever with respect to drivers and including operators who will be displaced because of this supposed modernization. And this modernization, Mr. President, did not even go through the usual process. The Philippines is known for its jeepneys. And all of a sudden, overnight, they want to phase it out and replacing it with these square-looking buses from China and Russia. The experience of Sorsogon, Mr. President, is not so good because about half at least, about 60% if in fact, are already unusable after less than 2 years. Kinakahuyan na lang po ng pyesa yung mga hindi na magamit. Kasi wala namang available na spare parts eh. Kasi yung mga pinoprovide nilang bus at pamalit ng mga jeep, hindi naman Toyota, hindi naman Mazda, hindi naman Mitsubishi, wala namang spare parts na available sa Banawi o kung saan-saan. Galing lahat sa kanila at hindi namin alam kung saan galing. And these are being spoon-fed, I'm being polite, to the cooperatives. Ang dagdag pahirap pa sa jeep, Mr. President, as you discussed kanina with Senator Risa, kailangan mo sumama sa kooperatiba, otherwise hindi ka kasama sa programa. Saan naman yun? Saan naman nakalagay yun? May I, at the proper time, ask that this discussion, on top of approving or adopting the resolution filed by Senator Grace, be referred to the Committee on Public Services, as this, I believe, needs an in-depth hearing on the matter so that all sides can be heard, and so that the striking jeepney drivers or those who are planning to strike next week, perhaps if given a forum, might hold it off as well. Because in a strike, nobody really benefits from it, both the riding public as well as the drivers themselves. Thank you, Mr.
At the
President.
proper time, we'll do so.
Come December 2023, yung mga utility vehicles naman ang ipe-phase out, Mr. President, kahit na okay pa na gamitin. At ang masakit po dito, Mr. President, binanggit ko na po ito ilang beses kay Senator Grace, dun sa Bulacan, po-force ka, dapat merong kang cooperative, ipo-force ka rin, Mr. President, kung saan mo bibilin yung units. Wala kang ibang choice. Halatang-halata ito na mafia to, Mr. President. O ngayon na natapos yung last administration, may bagong administrasyon, mga interesado rin, nagkukumahog po yung mga mafia doon na sila naman. I actually wanted to put on record, Mr. President, that no less than the Secretary of the OTR himself, Secretary Tugade, before the pandemic, Mr. President, told our staff in my office, here in this August chamber, Mr. President, sa kanya ho mismo nang galing. Ang daming mafia dyan. May mga mafia dyan. May mga corrupt dyan sa LTFRB. I just wanted to put that on record, Mr. President, that it's not just me, but even the then DOTR Secretary made mention of that words, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you.
I would like to commend you on your passionate and in pursuing this resolution for our hardworking jeepney drivers. Mr. President, ang bottom line dito sa nakikita ko ay salapi. May mga gustong kumita. Unang-una na dyan, they're now salivating. Tumutulo ng laway nito mga taga-LTFRB na atat ng kumita ng mga pilak. God knows who does not pay. Alam niyo po yung sa jeepney? Nakalagay, God knows who does not pay. Maraming mga hudas. Yes, na gustong yumaman. Gustong tumiba-tiba. At the expense of the mga pobreng jeepney drivers. Just imagine, 2.4 million po ang halaga ng yung modernized jeep na sinasabi nila. At 300,000 naman po ang mabibigyan ng subsidy. So 2.1 million po ang kailangang pagbabayaran ng mga jeepney drivers. Alam naman po ng mga taga-LTFRB kung magkano lang po kinikita ng isang jeepney driver sa maghapon. Ang marami sa kanila hindi pa nga po makabuo ng boundary. Ang ilan sa kanila kahit isang tuka dahil nga po mahina ang kita. Pagkatapos kakargahan ng 2.1 million pesos na poproblemahin babayaran, ang kakapal ng mga mukha nito mga nagtutulolaway ng mga taga-LTFRB. At tama kayo, Mr. President, I agree with you. Yung mga taga-LGU, kanya-kanyang diskarte. Ayaw magbigay ng rota dahil gusto nilang sarilinin yung rota, kailan dumaan sa kanila. I have so many experiences, hindi naman po lahat. Ito mga taga-LGU, gustong kumita. Hinuhuli po yung mga jeepney drivers. Hinuhuli po yung mga tricycle sapagkat gusto nilang magkaroon ng sarili nilang unit. Gusto nilang maging mga operators. Marami din sa mga taga-LGU, again, hindi naman po lahat na mga loko-loko, unfortunately. Sa halip na kaawa ng kanilang mga constituent, mga taong bumoto sa kanila, yung pang kanilang mga ginigipit. FYI, mga taga-LTFRB, ang jeepney po ay parte na ng ating kultura. As a matter of fact, ang mga taga-ibang bansa, pinupuri po ang ating mga jeepney. At ginagamit po ito bilang tourist attraction sa kanilang lugar. Ipinagmamalaki ang jeepney natin. Pagkatapos tayo, ipipace out natin ang ganun-ganun na lamang. Ang kakapal na mukha nito mga taga-LTFRB. Ang kakapal na mga mukha nitong ilan mga taga-LGU. Hindi nag-iisip. Ang tanging iniisip lamang po nila, Mr. President, ang kanilang bulsa. And adding insult to injury, saan galing? Saan manggagaling itong mga jeepney? Galing ng China. Na kung saan, itong mga taong ito, ang hanggang ngayon, even while we speak, ay tuloy-tuloy na inapi ang ating mga mangingisda. Pagkatapos sa nating mga ngisda, tutulungan natin sila na para kumita, pagkakitaan, ang mga jeepney drivers. Para kumita, ang mga INUTIL na mga taga-LTFRB. Mr. President, baka marami pa akong masasabi. Bago ako ma-high blood, ang sasabihin ko lang, LTFRB, maghunos dili kayo. Dahil kapag hindi, pareho tayong sasabog, believe me or not. Maraming salamat, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you very much, my distinguished colleague.
Just a reaction. Thank you, Senator Tulfo, for your passionate speech. I know that you feel for the least of our countrymen. Alam niyo po, tama yung sinabi din ni Senator Cheese at ni Senator Tulfo. Pag itong mga binibiling mga modernized jeep na to nasira, wala namang mga dealers na yan dito eh. So yung mga parts, pahirapan ng pagkuha. Naalala niyo yung mga Mahindra? noon.
Of course.
'Di ba? Naging problema din 'yan, 'di ba? Bakit tayo nagse-settle sa ganon? So, yun nga, parang merong gustong kumita. Kaya sa hearing, gusto ko rin matanong, sino ba ang nagbibigay ng accreditation sa mga kooperatiba? At paano nila, kasi bago ka sumali sa kooperatiba, sasabihin sa'yo, oh, pero i-modernize mo yung jeep mo. Dito mo lang bibilin. So may mga, 'di ba? Meron ng mga connection sila. So yun lamang po.
That during his hearings on electric vehicles, I had pointed out the importance of the jeepneys in our traditions and culture. The jeepneys, as everyone, I think everyone here will still recall that most jeepneys of our youth were decorated lavishly in very vivid colors representing different aspects of Filipino culture and life. And time and again, when we talk about the transition to e-vehicles, I would always point out that two things. The Philippines has had the unique opportunity to transition after World War II these vehicles that were used during the war into what became everyday transportation. So that in itself, the jeepney itself as a structure is part of our culture and traditions. And then the art that goes on these jeepneys, again, form part of our art and our culture. Does it mean that we do not move forward, that we do not innovate? No, that is not what it means. But it means that we shouldn't, what I'm trying to say is we shouldn't leave behind this amazing representation of our culture that we have created. And this innovation that happened, maybe half a century ago or more, is something we should seriously consider. When the government determines that it will subsidize the jeepney drivers with a measly 160,000, when the total cost is 2 million, it's a joke, Your Honors. It does not clearly allow these jeepney drivers to make a decent living. And it is contrary to SDG number 8, which we are committed to. We are committed. We are a signatory to these SDGs, Your Honors. And let's recognize that these innovations were made by various Filipino companies. Our colleague from Cavite, Senator Tolentino, mentioned Sarao. The other industry that I remember, the other company that I remember is Francisco Motors, and I know there are others. And has the government thought of supporting these companies so that they can continue to innovate and thrive during this time? These are questions that I hope can also be tackled, Your Honors, in the coming hearings. So on that note, I'd like to point out one more SDG. This is sustainable cities and communities. Obviously, when we think of sustainable cities, our vision are walkable cities, bikeable cities. The Senate has done their part. We've passed that bill. And then we think of sustainable transportation as a whole. Public transportation that is easily accessible to the public would include trains, buses, and they can include jeepneys or whatever we want to transition into, but it must always consider that sustainability, this particular SDG 11, also includes customs and traditions. And so my fervent hope is that we include this in our discussions in the coming hearings. And again, I thank Her Honor for taking this up and bringing this to our attention. Thank you, Mr. President.
I am one with Senator Po, our colleagues and our kababayans in raising the issue of jeepney phase out in several parts of the country. Mr. President, for the past decades, we have been dependent on POJs and POVs to help us our commute with our commute every day. Naging parte na rin po ito ng ating kultura bilang Pilipino ang pagsakay ng jeep at karaniwan din po ginagamit na simbolo ang jeep na i-represent ang ating bansa. Katunayan lang po na ang jeepney ay parte na rin po ng ating buhay bilang Pilipino. Kung kaya naman po, Mr. President, I personally appeal that the LTFRB delay the phase out of our jeepneys. Let us give our jeepney drivers enough time to adjust and comply with the changes that this new policy will require. Pag wala na pong jeepney, parang wala na po tayo sa Cubao, parang wala na tayo sa Quezon Avenue, wala na tayo sa Pilipinas. At ako mismo noon po ay sumasakay talaga ng jeepney dyan sa E. Rodriguez, sa Camyas, sa Kamuning. At naabutan ko pa yung jeepney erap. Hanggang ngayon, inabutan na lang ng jeepney JB at jeepney Jinggoy. So nakagawian na po natin. Anyway, when our jeepney drivers suffer, our commuters suffer with them. Sa pagbabagong idudulot ng modernisasyon na ito, our commuters will also have to adjust their budgets to afford new means of transportation. At kapag nagkaroon po ng malawakang strike ang ating jeepney at UB drivers sa iba't ibang parte ng bansa, mas lalo pong mahirapan ang ating mga commuters na umaasa po sa public transportation araw-araw. Karamihan po sa mga drivers ay may binubuhay po at pinapakain. Mr. President, basta wala pong maiwan at maagrabyado, while we understand the need to evolve given newer challenges of the environment, climate change, and the economy, let us not transfer the burden to the poor who need our help. Importante din po ang safety ng pasahero sa usapan dito, ngunit wag natin pabayaan ang mga ordinaryong jeepney drivers na wala po silang matakbuhan o pambili ng bagong pampublikong sasakyan. Lalo na ngayon, di pa tayo tapos sa krisis na dulot ng COVID-19.